Hi, everyone. It's great to see you tonight. Well, I guess I can't see you, but it's great that we're all here. I have to tell Bruce that his anniversary isn't the only one tonight. It is also my daughter, Jody Jones, Jody and Steve Jones. It's also their 19th anniversary tonight. And that made me think about June and being the month for weddings. And I was thinking about all the brides that plan to get married this June and now have to decide whether or not they're going to go for all the bells and whistles and postpone or have something more simple. And that reminded me of a little story I heard from one of the patients I talked to at the hospital. I told her a story about a wedding with all the bells and whistles and dresses and music. And when I got done, she kind of went, she said, I I just had a plain wedding. It was plain. We were plain people. Well, I thought for a minute that this was some kind of a religious sect, you know. She said, "Well," she said, "I met George when I was in grade school, and we knew right away that we were going to be married someday. And well, we didn't do anything foolish. We stayed in school and we got diplomas and I got a job at the telephone company and he got a job in construction. And we just knew that one day we'd get married. And then we were 21 and we had lunch one day and George said, what do you say we get married this afternoon? I said, okay. So we made plans to go to my pastor's house out in Greenville because he knew me and George since we were kids and he'd marry us. And I went home and changed. I wore a church dress, but it was just plain. And George, he put on a shirt and pants, and off we went. When we got to my pastor's house, his wife said that he wasn't home, that he had been at a revival. It would be a couple of hours yet, and we were welcome to sit on the porch and have some tea. But George said, no, we plan to go out and get something to eat afterward. So we'll just go get something to eat now, and then we'll come back. And so we left. Well, the minister's wife, my pastor's wife, rather, she knew me since I was a kid, and she knew my mother, and she called her up. She said, Sally, know what your daughter's doing today? And my mother said, well, she worked, I guess. Well, no, she was just here with George, and they plan on getting married this afternoon. You don't say. Well, fancy that. She thinks she's going to get married without her mother. Ha, she has another thing coming. My mother got off the phone and called George's mother, and two of them had quite a conversation. But the end was that both, when George and I returned from dinner, my mom and dad and my sister and George's mom and dad and his brother were all sitting on the porch drinking tea. And we waited, and then the pastor came home, and when he found out what we wanted, he was a little dismayed, and he said, well, there's a problem. You see, my license to marry people is from Washington County, and where I'm living here, where we are now, is Greenville, and I don't have permission to marry people here. Oh, but you know what? I know where the boundary is in the road. It's up the road a piece. If we all walk up the road, I know where the line is, the boundary line. And if we walk over the line, I can marry you in the middle of the road. So that's what we did. We all trooped up the road, except my dad. He drove the car because he wanted to turn his lights on so the pastor could read in his book. And the pastor married us in the middle of the road. It was just a plain wedding, but it lasted over 60 years. And so I guess what's important about a wedding is just like Bruce, you have to have a story. And anybody who's getting married this year, in the COVID crisis will have a good story too. Well, I promised you a story about a plant. And this story starts on April 1st, April Fool's Day. Maybe that's why it turned out the way it did. I got a call from my daughter, Jody, who said, "Mom, I have a birthday present for you." "But Jody, my birthday's not for 2 weeks yet." "But Mom, this present is sort of time sensitive. In fact, I should have gave it to you earlier." Well, that made me curious, so I ran right over. My birthday present from Jody was 2 bags of compost. Now, you might think that's not a very sentimental present to buy your mother for her birthday, something that used to be garbage. But I had mentioned that I wanted 2 bags of compost, and Jody listened and she heard and she got them. And I was grateful. I liked that idea. I liked the compost. But that wasn't the end of the present giving. She bought something else. She bought me a seed starter kit. You know, one of those little boxes that have little cups in them that you put little tiny seeds in them. Then you water them and you put the plastic top on and you water, you wait and then you water and then you wait and you water and well, it's a lot of work. And I never had good luck with those. And this wasn't something that I had mentioned I wanted. And Jody should have known what kind of gardener I am. I'm the kind of gardener who goes out in the yard and digs and throws some dirt around. And then she goes off to Lowe's and she buys 4 or 5 tomato plants, the biggest ones she can find, preferably the ones that have little green tomatoes on them already. And then she brings them home and she sticks them in the dirt and she lets Mother Nature take care of them. Now I had 50 baby plants. And I'm telling you, I did my best. I did everything for 6 long, long weeks. And Mother's Day came along, and I knew that Mother's Day means it's okay to put your plants outside because all danger of frost is over. So I said, "You little suckers are going outside because I'm done with all this." I went outside with shovel and all my gear, and I planted 40 baby plants. There were about 10 that didn't come up. And I also planted about 4 or 5 of those tomato plants because I figured these teeny, tiny, tiny little baby plants, I was going to be lucky if I got a tomato by December. When I got all done, I picked everything up, some to the trash, some to put away, and I noticed that I forgot one little cup. And the plant, and it was like this big, wasn't even a plant. It was hardly out of its shell, the seed thing. And you know what? I said, the heck with it. I did all this. I'm done. I don't even have space for it. So I just whipped it over my shoulder and went in the house. A couple hours later, I came out to water because I know enough that new plants need water. And I saw this weed in the yard. It's about 12 inches high. And I thought, you know what? It's just not fair. We can't eat weeds and they grow like crazy. And things that we can eat just take forever and a lot of work. And I looked at that weed and I said, "Well, you can't stay here. This is grass area. No weeds allowed. I'm going to pull you out." So I grabbed a hold of it and I huffed and I puffed and I pulled and it didn't come out. Tried it again, huffed and I puffed and I pulled and I couldn't get it out. I knew I'd have to get the big guns. And I know that those of you who know us know that Joe does not jump when I ask him to do something. And so it was hours later after dinner that he finally came outside to pull out the offending weed. He looked at it. I looked at it. It was like twice as big as it was the first time I saw it. And Joe said, "Where did this come from?" And I said, "I don't know." He said, "Well, I guess that's what you get when you have your 15-year-old grandson mow your lawn. They see a weed, they just go around it." So he huffed and he puffed and he pulled and he yanked and he huffed and he puffed and he pulled and he yanked. He couldn't get it out. No, couldn't. So then he said, "I'll dig it out." And he got a shovel. And the grass around that plant was matted so tight, and the dirt felt like concrete, and we just couldn't even get the shovel. Well, we'd have to dig up the whole side yard. And that wasn't going to work. And then he said, "I know, I'll just cut it off." And I said, "No, no, don't do that. We did that to the trumpet vine, and now it grows up everywhere. No, don't do that." Well, then, there's only one thing left: to use Roundup. Now, we don't use Roundup very often, but if there was ever a case for Roundup, this was it. And so Joe got the Roundup out and he sprayed that sucker over and under. It was dripping. He said, "They'll be dead by tomorrow morning." So we went in. Now, I normally wake up between 8 and 8:30. I don't have to set the alarm clock anymore for anything, but I usually wake up somewhere around then. The next morning I woke up and it was dark. And I thought I woke up early until I looked at the clock. And the clock said it was 8:15, but it was dark. So I went over to the window and I pushed aside the curtain, and the window was plastered green with green leaves laying on top of each other. There wasn't a speck of light that could get into that room. I said, Joe, let's go outside." I threw on some clothes and we ran around the side of the house. And that plant was as high as our one-story house. I said, "We got to go. We got to go now. We have to go to Evergreen." Now, Evergreen is the top nursery around. They have all the experts there, and that's where we go when we need help. We got to go ask the experts what to do about this. So we hacked off one of the leaves. It took Joe forever, and that leaf was as big as a gigantic pizza. I put it in a garbage bag. We got over to Evergreen, and we went from one expert to another. And I showed them the leaf, and they looked at it, and their eyes got as big as an extra large pizza. And they said, "Never saw anything like that before." And we went from one to another, and nobody. I didn't know what I was going to do. And finally, this nice lady came over that worked there, and she said, "I think Dr. Fred might know what that is. Dr. Fred used to work here. He doesn't anymore, but he probably would help you. He knew all kinds of strange plants. He might help you." And so phone calls were made to this Dr. Fred. And it turned out that he lived on top of Rome Mountain. And I don't know where the heck it was. And he had his own little private road, and he didn't have an address. So Google wasn't going to help us much. So it turned out to be one of those old-fashioned things where you turn left at the barn, and then you go over the bridge and you bear right, and then you turn right at the rock. We kept picking the wrong bridge and the wrong rock. Oh, it took us 3 hours to get up on top of Rome Mountain. Well, I finally got up there. Well, I expected this Dr. Fred guy to come out in overalls and plaid shirt, maybe a beard, big old boots. But that's not who came out. The man who came out was dressed in a khaki uniform of the Tennessee Forestry Agency. And he came over and said, "Are you the folks that have the strange leaf?" And he said, "Yes." And I pulled it out of the bag. And then Dr. Fred's eyes got as big as an extra large pizza. And he reached out and he touched the leaf reverently. He said, "Oh, I never thought I'd live to see one of these. I can die a happy man now." "What is it?" He said. "It's a genuine, prehistoric, colossal beanstalk leaf." Genuine, colossal, prehistoric? What? A genuine, prehistoric, colossal beanstalk leaf is what you got here. They used to flourish when the dinosaurs were here, you know. That's what the dinosaurs ate. They were hungry. Then when the dinosaurs died out, these colossal beanstalks died out, but some of the seeds were left behind, and every once in a while they turn up. Yeah, we haven't seen one for a couple 100 years or so. You know, over in Europe, I don't know how many hundreds of years ago, but a lady, she threw some beans out the window. She was mad at her son because he came home with some beans. I don't know this. So she got mad and she threw them out the window. And the next day there was a giant stalk right outside her house. Listen, Mr. Fred, Dr. Fred, whoever you think you are. We came all the way up this godforsaken mountain to get help. We didn't get up here to hear about some fairy tale to someone to make fun of us because we have a problem in our yard. This is just wrong. This is mean. Oh, woman, calm down, lady, calm down. I didn't mean no. This is true. This is true. There was one. I know what you're talking about. You're talking about Jack and the Beanstalk. No, that's just a fairy tale, folk tale. It was made up after the fact. The beanstalk really grew. The Jack story, that all came later. But if you really have one of these in your yard, we got to go to your house right away. Tell you what, you can ride in my little red truck and I'll tell you more about it. I don't do little red trucks. You can follow us in our car. So off we drove down the mountain, past the river, past the rock, past the barn. And when we got back to our house, the neighborhood was full of cars. Police were directing traffic. We had to park 3 blocks away, and our neighborhood has lots of trees in it. And I couldn't even see out until I got to my own block when I looked up and I saw that beanstalk went way up in the sky, way past till I lost it in the clouds. And there was a yellow caution tape and a big crowd in the street around my house. And I looked, and the stalk at the bottom was like 6 or 8 feet around, and it had pushed my house off its foundation. And then when people realized that I was the homeowner, all these suit people came running at me. The director of public works and the superintendent of sanitation department and the electric company and the cable company. And they all said that the roots and leaves were interfering, and the roots were going to break the pipes. And there was even the chairman of the neighborhood beautification committee. And she had words too about what a disgrace I was for planning this ugly thing. My house. And I said, well, what are we going to do? And they said, we're going to chop it down. But you, because you caused all this, are responsible for all the damage. Well, sign here. And I signed the paper. And as they were going to get the chainsaw, which took like 3 people to carry, my daughter Jody comes running up to me and says, Mom, where have you been? We've been here since this morning when we saw the greens thing. And Julian, Julian, my crazy son, Julian, He said it might be fun to climb up this thing. I told him on no uncertain terms, but I think he didn't, Mom, because I can't find him. I haven't found him for 2 hours. His bike's still here. And we looked up, way, way up. We saw a little black speck, like a bug, coming down the stalk. But the chainsaw started up, and it was making a terrible roar. And even if we yelled, "Stop, stop, stop," they didn't hear us. And Jody ran over to her husband, Steve, and said, "You got to do something. Julian's up there. And if the stalk falls, he falls." And oh, well, luckily, Steve is an expert drone operator, and he happened to have one in his car. So he went out and he opened up the trunk, got the drone out, and started it up. And he worked it up, 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 up into the sky. And now the green stalk was waving, and the drone was waving. We were worried about them colliding. And finally, Julian had the sense to grab onto that drone. And then Steve brought the drone back to the earth. And it seemed like just as soon as Julian's feet hit the earth, somebody yelled, "Timber!" Boom! That beanstalk fell. It fell across the street. It fell between my neighbor's 2 houses, but unfortunately, it crunched their garage. It fell into the school playground and smashed all the equipment. And then it lined up with the highway and it hit 2 cars. One of them was a Lamborghini. And everybody was saying that I was responsible. I would have to pay for everything. And I didn't even have a house. I started to cry. And Julian ran up to me and said, "Don't cry, Grammy, don't cry. Wait." And he took off his backpack and he opened it up and he pulled out a chicken, a hen. And this particular hen had been so unnerved by its drone ride to Earth that it laid 3 golden eggs. And Julian said, "See, Ma, see, Grammy, we'll have enough money to fix Grammy's house, and we might take a whole egg to pay for that Lamborghini, but we'll be okay." And I knew then that maybe even Julian's, if the hen kept laying eggs, Julian's education would probably be paid for. Julian didn't care about that. He was just happy because he got 2 zillion million hits on YouTube. And someone later called and asked if he wanted to star in a movie called Julian and the Beanstalk. And Dr. Fred, the last time I saw him, he was gathering beans and carrying them to his truck. And I don't know where he's going to plant them, but I hope it's nowhere near me. Thank you.